something I have learned that 22-year-old Weston did not know is that coaches are responsive and for the most part generous if you reach out. And so I've learned to ask. I've learned to, you can find an email really easily in 5 seconds or less. And don't be afraid to reach out to somebody that you want to learn from. People are willing to share. And anything that we've done, I promise I did not come up with any of it, right? It's been learned from people I've worked for, people I've listened to, people I've observed, people, whatever. So never be afraid to reach out.
Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it.
Today we are joined by the head men's basketball coach at Harding University, Weston Jameson. Coach Jameson played at Harding from 2009 to 2014. He's currently in his second season as a head coach. Coach Jameson started his coaching career at Central Christian High School as a junior high coach in 2014. He then went back to Harding as a women's assistant coach from 2015 to 2020. He spent 1 year at Arkansas State and 2 years at Abilene Christian University as a women's assistant coach before returning to his alma mater as the head men's coach in 2023. Last year at Harding, Coach Jameson led the Bisons to the GAC tournament for the first time since 2017. They also had the most wins since 2017. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at JAMODI Podcast.
Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here.
Coach,
How's it going?
it's good, man. How are you?
I'm doing very good, very good. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I was going to say thank you so much for giving up your time. I know things are really busy at your level and that you would carve this out a little bit of time to talk hoops with me. The honor is mine.
I'm excited. I was literally just on the phone having a recruiting conversation 20 seconds ago before I hopped on. So it stays, it stays busy, but that's at every level too. I know that, high school, it's busy this time of year. College, same thing. So, I mean, everybody's busy, but it's great to talk basketball.
I was just thinking, okay, do I go along with what he's saying and act like I'm really busy right now? And I said, or do I be completely honest with what I just got done doing in the gym with our guys? So we just finished our Lion Games, the second day. Lion Games, this is our third annual. They are minute-to-win-it games that you would play at like a party or with a church group. Balloons, straws, cups, all kinds of shenanigans with some type of basketball movement, maybe like a three or a bounce shot. One of the games they had to do a human pyramid at the end to win, but they dress up. It is 2 days of just madness. They love it. It's something they look forward to. It's something that, not a lot of people do. So when you said, I know high school coaches are busy, I was like, I just officiated the Lion Games.
Well, you're doing basketball stuff, working on team chemistry.
That's
if you're gonna be a great program, you have to carve out stuff like that. So that's a really cool thing, and I would love to at some point learn more about that because that sounds something like we'd be interested in doing.
Wow. Well, honored. I'll send you my little document that I've kind of put up. I stole it from a coach in, I believe, Matt Dennis up in like Michigan. I had a talk with him. He just did a lot of good stuff on Twitter, and I borrowed it from him. And we just, the first year we did it, the guys had no clue what was going on. The second year they started, we let them form teams, and they started to really get into it. This year, these guys, they each had like a uniform that they created for their team. And it is really fun. Anybody that wants to check it out too, our YouTube page for Grapevine Faith boys basketball, I think you can watch the last 2 years, the highlights of it. And I'm going to work on that, but it is something that you nailed it though. I jokingly say, like, it's all fun. It is, but culture.
Yep.
Like, when you watch the highlight videos, yeah, you can check out, like, the game that they're playing, but you got to check out the communication. They have to organize themselves in these games. They have to learn to follow others, and sometimes they're the one in the lead. They have to celebrate each other and also handle losing in the correct way, which not everybody did this week, but there's a lot more to it, and I'll be happy to share with anybody.
You can continue doing lots of basketball, and there's probably not a ton of interest in that after a really long season, or you find creative ways to, grow as teammates and grow the chemistry and build for next year and all that. And that sounds like that's a great way to do it. We did some basketball stuff, but I would say our most productive spring days were going to the golf course and hitting golf balls and watching people do that for the first time, or playing pickleball.
Nice.
Or we got with one of our football coaches, our DB's coach, and he put us through a day of being a defensive back. And Harding won the Division II national championships in football this year. And so football has a lot of great momentum on campus, and it was great for him to volunteer his time. And then we did, you do all the DB drills, right? And so it's, backpedaling and hip movement and press coverage and off coverage and all of that stuff. And our guys had a blast. But then at the end, the real treat is doing one-on-ones in the red zone. And so, it's receiver versus DB. And so I hopped out there and gave up a touchdown, and it ended up falling on the play too. I was like, when
is there film on that? We got film on that?
There actually is film on it on our Twitter, Instagram. And I was like, we were recording it, and I was like, you can put it down there. But when you reach the age where it's like, I still think I can jump, and then you jump, and then you just tumble, and it's like, I was not trying to be that unathletic, but that looked really bad on film, and the guy just over me, and so the guys had a good laugh. But it was, those were some fun days this spring.
Coach, I'm so past that age that I don't even, it's like, what did Joey say in Friends? He said, you're so past the line that the line is a dot to you now. Like, I'm so past that. But great example of what you did. It's refreshing to hear, at the college level, that guys are being creative like that. And we are so hyper-focused on, and it's not a bad thing, to be focused on maximizing our time with the guys. We want to prepare, get them better with their skill, get them more dynamic. We don't want to waste a second. And we want them to feel that urgency. Like, if this is a serious thing that they're doing, then we need to value their time. But then I think both of our games, our activities, and all the things you do are examples of, maybe we look for opportunities to deposit back into their account. Because, man, we withdraw a ton. All spring long, the guys here at Faith have been coming at 6 a.m., lifting and shooting. They go to first period, and then they have a 43-minute skill workout with me. And we've been doing that for 8 weeks, and we don't skip, we don't miss. We don't just say, hey, today's a free day. Heck no. So the Lion games, like, it's a perfect way. Now, if the Lion games are every week, if they're every other day, when's the last time we did skill work? If that's the feeling, then we've pivoted too far. But man, Coach, I think you're right on the money. The more we can look to deposit now when the season's really far away, then we can make those big withdrawals when we need to.
Yep, definitely.
Like I said, really appreciate you coming on. And I think this is a fun talk to have, because there's maybe, like, you can boil it down to 3 stages in your career. You've had, I just spoke with the Oakland coach, which can't be, that's been there for 40 years. So, like, he's on that side. I think there's a lot of guys like me that are maybe kind of right in the middle, 16 to 25 years in there, right? And then there's guys that I would say probably the bigger part of it is young, like 1 through 5 years, and no matter what level you're at. So your first year at Harding, we'll definitely want to get into that, but I can't wait to hear your perspective from somebody that was a player, he played at Harding, but then also now kind of starting out. Coach, I think there's a lot of people that need to hear, they just finished their first year. They need to hear kind of from you.
What a dramatic difference in talking to Coach Campy and then talking to me. That was all I could think about was 40 years of head coaching experience.
But I felt the same way. Like, I can't even imagine
Yeah.
like what it's like to be at that point. But he just said, he's like, I woke up one day and it was 40 years later.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things is, I was also an assistant for the last 8, 9 years. Just while that experience is still really fresh, because there's going to come a point in time where, I'm going to forget a lot of things potentially about what being an assistant was like. But while I still have that really fresh, I think that's really valuable too. And just in terms of, how our assistants operate and their responsibilities, and making sure that I remember, like one of the coolest things ever. This was my first year as the head coach, right? And my first day on the job, I walk in, I'm hired on a Thursday afternoon last spring, and we have a 6 a.m. workout Friday morning that was already scheduled. And so it was, hey, come to the 6 a.m. workout, go back home, and then move back. And so I go to the 6 a.m. workout, and it's 6 a.m. Our guys are just dragging in, and there's no music playing. And I go up to our strength coach, and I was like, hey, I said, do we not play music in the morning? He was like, no. And I was like, well, from now on, every workout, but especially every 6 a.m. workout, let's make sure that we have music playing. And then one of our managers, and I said, do we have water bottles for our guys? And he said, no, in the spring, we don't typically do water bottles. And I said, well, at every workout from now on, so, as an assistant coach, right, you're thinking about those things, and maybe you say them, maybe you don't, but regardless, it's never your decision. And then, what happened Monday at 6 a.m.? We had music playing, and all of our guys had water bottles. And I was like, this is really cool. So, there are moments like that are neat, but just having the perspective of an assistant coach, while it's still fresh, was really helpful too.
You just talked about the assistant coach role being so fresh in your mind. So now you move over those 18 inches or 6 inches. I've heard some people call it 6 because, that's how close the chairs are, 18, whatever it is. But moving over into the new role, how did you this season divide up those responsibilities, especially since they were so close in the front of your mind?
Yeah, I'm definitely more of an 18-inch guy than 6-inch guy, because I like a little bit of space between the chairs on the bench. So that's that. I know people do say 6 inches. I'm going to go 18. One of the things that I really wanted to do was I wanted to surround myself with great people. Right? It's not a good thing when you're the smartest person in the room. It's always better to be around people who are great. And have strengths where you have weaknesses. One of the things that, and you may or may not be familiar with the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 1, and it's a personality type.
Okay.
I'm personality types, but I'm a perfectionist. And so, and that probably hits a lot of people, but, something that I struggle with is, not being good at something, or there being a weakness. And I heard from a professional coach in the NBA, but like all coaches have strengths and weaknesses. At the NBA level, everyone's a good coach, right? You don't get to the NBA level without being a good coach. But even the best coaches have strengths and weaknesses. And so that's just been a good mindset shift for me, going, okay, I'm not going to be great at everything, and recognizing where I have weaknesses, and then making sure that you surround yourself with people who can maximize those weaknesses. And so we have a phenomenal staff here at Harding. Our assistant coach, his name's Bradley Spencer. He was a teammate of mine for 4 years at Harding. And so, I love Harding. It changed my life. And then if you talk to Bradley, he could tell you a very similar story about just what Harding did for him and the love that he has. In recruiting, that's extremely valuable too, right? When we're saying, all right, I've literally been in the classrooms that you'll be in, all of that stuff. So that's great. But Bradley was a high school head coach for the last several years, most recently in his hometown before he came to Harding with me. And so he had been a head coach, and I had not, right? So it was me taking a role that I had never been in, and also him maybe taking a step back, or however, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But him going from being a head coach to an assistant coach, I know that is a tough transition too. And so I wanted to be very mindful of that. At the Division II level, some schools may have 2 assistant coaches. At Harding, we have 1 assistant coach. And so because of that, there is a lot of responsibility. If I'm thinking of what I learned this year, one of the big things was, as an assistant coach, especially at the college level, how do you stand out? How do you carve out a valuable role in a program? Well, recruiting is the main thing, right? Is your ability to recruit. Typically, those are the people who get better jobs or keep their job because they're at a place that's winning or whatever. And so, but it was all player focused. And going from the assistant coach, where I've been all about recruiting and players and all that, to the head coach, I found that a lot of my time was on tasks that don't necessarily involve players, right? It's you're in meetings that I was never in before, or fundraising or budgeting, or, whatever. There's lots of things that are part of my day that don't involve our players. And so I had to lose some control over what I would like to think made me successful or helped me have success over the previous 8 years, which is you're doing a lot of recruiting. And so, turning some of that over, handing some of that off, but more basketball specific, Bradley, our assistant coach, right? I wanted to make sure that he felt valued in games and in practices. And one of the best things a head coach can do is they can make their assistants feel valued. And, that as an assistant coach, when you're valued, you will run through the wall for your boss. And when you don't feel valued, it's really hard to be motivated. And so I worked for someone who in games just, we were on the same page, but in games it was like, hey, whatever I say, sometimes we'd be like, you don't always have to go with what, like, I may not be right about everything, but that's how they made me feel, was like, like I was helping our team win in practice, during games. And so I wanted Bradley, our assistant coach, to have a big role with that. On the floor, he handles all of our defense. And so I know that there are lots of people moving to kind of the football model, which is what I would say of, you have an offense coordinator, defense coordinator, special situations coordinator, whatever. Our staff isn't big enough to have a setup like that. But I found that me running the offense and him running the defense, it really allowed us to maybe just hone in our focus on the thing on that area. And so that was really valuable. There were lots of other responsibilities that Bradley had, but just that was a big one that for our program, it really worked. He's the energy guy. He's the motivator guy. And that's great for defense. And he did a phenomenal job with that this year. But moving forward, that's our setup. And I really liked how that went.
And I think it shows a lot of maturity and a lot of confidence from the head coach to give up a side of the ball or that much, like you said, control. Wes Watson at McKinney High School, when I was his varsity assistant, we did that. I was the offensive guy. He was the defensive guy. And it really was great to divide up those responsibility and focuses, because the idea of the head coach being able to, yes, we can watch both ends, but have the same focus from play to play on each end, because something that happens on the offensive end that is stuck in your mind and that you're trying to work out, that you're trying to communicate, man, that ball is moving. And now the other side, and you can't just take a break. You can't just let it go. So you split those responsibilities. And I just celebrate you for doing that, because it's hard to do. And Coach Watson, I was always impressed with, because I was only 25 at the time when he kind of let me do that. And that takes a lot of trust.
We want to play fast. And had I not done that, I think, instead of on a defensive miscue or something, and I would be focused on that instead of, all right, now let's push the ball. Let's try to get something easy. An unintended consequence in the best way was, I was coaching, once you get into your season, a lot of times the rotations, settle, and you end up, here are the 8 or 9 or 10 guys, or however big however many guys you play, that kind of just settles. And so in season, if you're coaching both sides of the ball, then, I don't know how everyone structures practice, but right, for most people, you have maybe an offensive period and a defensive period or something along those lines. Well, if you're coaching all of it, then you're spending 100% of your practice time with those 8 guys or 9 guys who play, right? You have them on offense, and then you switch to defense, you have them on defense. And the unintended consequence that I loved was, is I was able to spend time with everyone during practice, and that was really valuable to me. I did find as a head coach, I just didn't have enough hours in the day to connect with everybody outside of practice. And so I knew that at least during practice, I was able to touch each person because we were going to be together at some point in practice. Everyone on our team would get some time with me. And that was an unintended consequence that was really beneficial, I felt like, in the long run.
One thing you said a little bit ago about losing control over some of those things, I think it's a great question for coaches to ask themselves, what is it out of my day, the things that I am in charge of, that I could lose control over and delegate to somebody else? I think if you don't ask that question, so many of us, we can just put our head down. We love the work. We love routines. And we just go through months and months of doing things that aren't necessary for the head coach's job. And you've got people that you want to empower to do more. But if you don't ask that question, so like I always try to think of, like, from these talks, what's an action item that I can take from it? Looking through my season, the day, maybe a fall, spring, or whatever chunk of time, and what are the things that I'm spending a lot of time on that I could lose control over and delegate to somebody else? I think that's a good question for us to ask.
Yeah, and and I don't know if this is the best question to ask, but there is a head coach who I know well who his lens or his filter on that is, does this affect winning? And if it does, then I need to be involved with it. And if it doesn't, then I can delegate it to somebody else. And so, again, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about what's the best question there because there are lots of things that affect winning that I may not necessarily be able to be directly involved with. I mean, academics is something that Coach Spencer spends a lot of time on. And does that affect winning? I think it certainly affects winning because there's a pretty strong correlation between people handling their business on the floor and in the classroom. Just finding the right filter, the right question to ask, and then finding ways that you can go, okay, I can release some of this. And also being mindful that I'm preparing my staff for hopefully a bigger role or more responsibility, or just making sure that they're better prepared to, whether that's them being with you for another year or, moving on to maybe a different role on a different staff, and making sure that you're preparing them. On my journey, there were so many people who did that, right? Like everywhere I went, it was, I took these handful of things away, but I worked for people who were intentional about preparing me for the role I'm in now. I'm very appreciative of that.
The JAMODI podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
You mentioned how many guys you play in rotations and things, and so I'm curious to see how you feel. I think it's nice to say, or the idea of playing a lot of guys. There are a lot of guys give up their time, they work, and it'd be great to reward them on the floor. How many guys do you feel like you need to play, like really have to, if it came down to it?
Yeah. Our season was very interesting this year. We lost. We just got hammered at the same position really quickly, and so we had our starting 5. He had a pretty major foot injury our last non-conference game, and he was a great player, missed a big chunk of the season, and then literally 2 games later, he was our starting 4 that we moved to the 5 and just kind of went small ball a little bit. He ended up having a different foot injury that,
oh man,
so like 2 guys at the same spot in 3 days. And so we had a guy who was redshirting until December 1st, a freshman who, we have a conversation with him. And then in March, he's playing 25 minutes in the conference.
Wow.
And he was redshirting until December. So there was a lot of shuffling this year that that was not ideal, but our guys, they really, like people say next man up, but it truly was a next man up mentality.
In that situation, yeah. Yes.
I think comfortably 9, you need to have 9 people ready to go. The way we're 4 out, 1 in, and so you need probably 2 5s, 2 1s, and then, between 2, 3, and 4, probably 5 guys there. That's kind of how I think about it. That doesn't mean that we always do that. Some games we would play more and some games less, but I think making sure that you have people capable in those positions, again, so much that depends on your roster, right? If you have 1 or 2 just dudes, then they need to, at our level, 35 plus minutes a game.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then maybe, I know scheme affects a lot of that too, but 9 is the number that I feel like is a good number. And then sometimes that ends up being 8, sometimes 10 or so.
Yeah. I think you're right on the money. Scheme had a lot to do with it. And then at the high school game, 32 minutes is really short.
It is.
Like I've realized over the years, the idea of having a 9-10 man rotation, I've even tried to get to 11 and 12 some years. The years where we're going 11 and 12, maybe it means that we may not be as good as we could be, or I think we will be, or we just might not be that great, because if we have to go that deep, is that guy really keeping the slack or replacing what 1 through 5 can do? Where I've gotten to the point now where, 7 or 8, I'm very comfortable with that. But then you got to think about how big of a roster do you want, as a high school coach, do you want to keep? Because can you have 7 that play and 8 that just practice? I don't know how many guys really have a love of the game, love of the team, love of that role for that. So maybe a smaller roster, but then you're rolling the dice on health, sickness, grades, all those other things. So, but I've always wondered, or thought about, I like the idea of more, but man, when I get down to it in a 32-minute game, I think I can roll with 6 or 7.
Yeah, and at the high school level, if you're playing 11 or 12, then that's
hard.
Either you're probably blowing.
You're Duncanville, or
yeah, exactly. It's probably one end or the other of the spectrum. And 7, 7 to 8 sounds right at the high school level. College with 40 minutes, 8 or 9 again. 2.25s, and then between the 2 through 4 spot, having 5 who are playing between 35 and 10 minutes a game, basically. But as I'm thinking about freshmen, and this is a college thing, not a high school thing, but I'm thinking about freshmen, can we get them to like 300 minutes a game, or 300 minutes for the season, right? If we're going to play 30 games, can we get them to 10 minutes a game? And if not, then they probably need to redshirt, and there's somebody else who can, you don't want to play 12 guys and everybody's, you look back at the end of the year and, hey, this kid only played, 80 minutes and he was a freshman. We could have developed him and maybe gotten him to 200 plus minutes as a redshirt freshman.
Yeah. And that's where the idea of development comes in, because a lot of parents, especially I feel like at the high school level, equate playing time with getting better, with development. And so I think it's up to us, whether it's at a parent meeting, in one-on-one meetings, with especially with the parents, getting to them as one of the major stakeholders in our players' lives. We have to help them see where development really happens. And so one of the things that I try to tell them is, if your son plays a lot, great. Like that's you're going to enjoy that, and it's because of his hard work. But if he doesn't, have him be a star or maximize that role during games, but he is still going to be developed. 43 minutes a day of skill work. But so many times they only think that on court time. Then you got to help him do the math there. If the game's 32 minutes, you cut in half offense, 16. Well, the best players are having the ball 90% of the time. That means the 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes that you're going to split up amongst the other 8, how much development is Johnny getting, really? And so, but if you can help him get there, I think that maybe help with where with us, we may have more of that parent involvement that you have. But I would imagine for you too, development has to stay constant throughout, so that everybody feels like they're improving.
You have to be intentional with it too, because if you're not, you get to the end of the year and you're like, man, because again, the same game analogy you're talking about is the same with practice, right? To where if you're not intentional, then you in practice you got 10 shots up, in live play, whatever, right? And I know coaches talk about that all the time, but like that's the reality is when you're a guy who doesn't have the ball in their hands a lot and you want to develop, what are you developing you're getting in better shape because you're running up and down the floor. But, so as coaches, like what you're saying, educating players, educating parents, but then intentionally building out that time. And it sounds like you're doing that. At the college level, we have to do that as well, to where we're making sure that the guys who aren't getting the game or practice experience are making the steps we need in our program to where they're ready in a year or two.
Coach, I'm giggling because I've transported back to 2003, my senior year. 2002. It was the last year that Dave Bliss was at Baylor, and we're practicing it, and he was not intentional, and so he would come down sometimes like, Matt, I know that you know all this stuff today, so I'm going to have you on the white team. Well, crap, like it's not a compliment, coach. Like it means you're not working with me. Like I'm on the scout team. And so he tried to do it like in a nice way, but we're scrimmaging one day. And if Will Allen ever listens to this, like I hope he laughed, because Will was a freshman walk on, but he was a good player, played at Highland Park. And but he's a freshman, and we're scrimmaging. We're going to have to, there's a long practice, and we get done and we look over and Will's kind of walking with us. I was like, Will, did you get in it all today? He goes, nope, saving my knees, just like MJ. It just made me, as soon as you said like, yeah, guys might not get in, I was like, Will Allen, like, but it does. We get what we emphasize. If we emphasize skill work, we will work it into our plan. It will show up. We'll have to take away from things. Maybe even goes back to asking yourself what you can give control or lose control of. Like, what do we have to give up to make sure that the development across the board continues to happen?
Yep, no doubt. And again, it's the same thing in practice, right? Where especially once you get into game, you're playing 2 games a week, and you look over and you're like, did they get any reps at practice today? No, they were just sitting over there the whole time. So again, being intentional about development for everyone is and it keeps morale high too, right? And more buy-in probably.
Yeah, you don't want those walk-ons or those guys at the end of the bench thinking that they're just saving their knees, just like MJ. I think so many, especially maybe as a perfectionist, like you said, you're constantly trying to pick up new things, and it doesn't matter whether it's year 1 or year 40. I feel like most coaches are lifelong learners. So what are some of those things that you've borrowed lately that you really like?
One of the things that
besides the Lion games, sorry.
I know I'm very excited to learn more about that. One of the things that has me excited finishing this first year is just thinking like, this may not be a great way to look at it, but this is the worst that I will ever be, hopefully, as a head coach. But if I just sit around and am not looking for ways to improve, then, I'm going to get the same results I got this year. So I've tried to be very intentional about reaching out to people, trying to learn from people. I was on a Zoom yesterday with a coach who I was like, I want to learn more about this part of your system or whatever. And he was very gracious to do that. And this isn't what you asked, and I'll get to that. But something I have learned that 22-year-old Weston did not know is that coaches are responsive and for the most part generous if you reach out. And so I've learned to ask. I've learned to, you can find an email really easily in 5 seconds or less. And don't be afraid to reach out to somebody that you want to learn from. People are willing to share for the most part, not everybody, but most coaches are willing to share. And anything that we've done, I promise I did not come up with any of it, right? It's been learned from people I've worked for, people I've listened to, people I've observed, people, whatever. So never be afraid to reach out.
Real quick on that note, I think you're right on the money. Big motivation of doing this is I get one-on-one time with you. If nobody ever watches or listens to any of these, I'm good, because I have professional development time with a captive coach, like, that not many people get. But you're right. Doing this 3 years and asking a lot of people like you to come on, I've rarely had a no answer or a no. And even, and then you just have to your point, you have to be okay with not getting a response. You have to be okay with a no, I'm busy, and say, hey, I appreciate that. Maybe some other time, but have no fear in asking. But most people, you're right on the money, like to talk hoops.
Yeah, and lots of times it may be a no, not right now, but then keeping that option open for the future, and obviously being respectful of at the highest levels, being respectful of knowing who to talk to, right? The head coach at Duke, Kansas, North Carolina, they're not.
Coach K won't respond to me. I just don't get it. That jerk,
So just knowing, okay, I really love this thing about this team, and then who's maybe not the head coach, but who's maybe a support staff member or an assistant coach who would have some knowledge on that, and then going through that. And then, you know what they're going to say probably? Hey, come to a practice. And you know what you're going to do when you go to a practice? You're going to get to meet the head coach, or you're going to get, there's just, there's so never be afraid to reach out. The best thing that I've borrowed lately. So this was something that we did with our team this year, and the benefits of it were tremendous. But there's an author speaker named Brett Ledbetter who does What Drives Winning. Are you familiar with Brett Ledbetter?
Heard the name. A lot of coaches have mentioned him over the years. I haven't. Yeah.
I mean, if you just go on YouTube for 10 seconds, you'll find tremendous videos. But this thing that he does, What Drives Winning, is all about development, the character development. And so, Brett, I believe I'm getting this right. I don't know Brett. I'm just a fan from a distance. But he started an organization, What Drives Winning, but he was a Division I basketball player who was very successful, but also just felt like maybe, we do a great job of developing the basketball piece, but maybe not so much the other stuff. And so he has several books, What Drives Winning Teams, What Drives Winning, something about maybe healthy environments, that kind of thing. So there's several books you can buy, but Brett works specifically with high-performing athletes, high-performing teams, not the Harding Bisons. Okay, so that's not where I'm going. But he does work with, Gonzaga men's basketball, Sabrina Ionescu when she was at Oregon, lots of successful people. And then he has conferences. He does a conference every year in the Dallas area with this organization and brings in lots of great coaches. So again, go to YouTube, check out his stuff. What he did, again, stolen everything we've done, is with Gonzaga, he did what they called PGMs, Personal Growth Mondays. And so it was an intentional time of development that he would run when he was in town or available. And then I think the strength coach ran it for some of the time. But we brought in somebody who is in the personal development, personal growth space. And this is a Harding alum. Again, I know not everyone has access to somebody like this, but there are ways to do this on a high school budget or the high school level or wherever. But we have an alum who works in an MBA organization in the development space. He's trying to develop coaches, front office, employees, all those people. And he works with our team weekly, and we call them PGMs, but we changed it from Mondays to meetings just so we weren't stuck on the day of the week, but personal growth meetings. And we start off the year by saying, I know this isn't true for everyone, but what are the biggest things that can get in the way of your basketball team this year? Now, at some point, that may be ability, right? If you're playing a team that just totally outmatched, maybe. But that doesn't happen most of the time, at least at the college level, at our level. It doesn't happen. What gets in our way are all the non-basketball stuff, the selfishness, the divisiveness, the lack of discipline, all the, off the court things. And so what we try to do is again, this guy puts together a presentation. And so there may be a video of Nick Saban or Buzz Williams or whoever talking about something character related. And then we just have a discussion, and that can be a 10 to 15 minute discussion. I mean, you could do this as a coach. You just go to YouTube. The coaches always retweet, repost videos they like, right? Yeah. All you're doing is you're just taking it to your team, thinking of one or two discussion questions, and then you're just doing that week after week after week, to where when those issues pop up during the season, you can go, hey, we talked about this 3 weeks. One of the things that happened this year was we achieved some success that the guys on our roster had never experienced before. And so it's like, how do you handle success? That was one of our weekly themes, and just emphasizing that success doesn't happen naturally, that you have to show up every day and do the work, right? And so again, PGMs and Brett Ledbetter, What Drives Winning, you'll get all this when you look him up. But when you do that week after week, and you're talking about for 15 to 30 minutes once a week about non-basketball stuff, we had some great discussions, and it was all player-led, right? We show the video, we have the prompt, and then and so, at the highest levels, maybe the coaches aren't involved, but at our level, at the high school level, maybe the coach is involved, but they're just the facilitator, and the guys talk through it all, and we had some really good conversations.
Man, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because one of my favorite parts of getting to do this is not that I take ideas from you, and I would encourage every coach to look at it this way. Not that I take that idea and I have to do it exactly like that.
Yep.
But that idea, how can I use it, tweak it to where it does work for us? So TJ Rosine, I took his idea of in season having a theme for every day. Thankful Tuesday, Wisdom Wednesday, or Tough Tuesday, Wisdom Wednesday, Thankful Thursday, Fun Friday. Mondays, we've done My Commitment Mondays. And so, because for some coaches, when they hear that, take 15, 20, 30 minutes, that's the part they go, who has that, right? Like, and to their credit, like, usually time is pretty strict. And so, but for me, I always have 3 to 4 minutes. So so on Mondays, I think we're going to change it to, instead of My Commitment Mondays, it's going to be PGM's Personal Growth Mondays. They get in groups of 3 or 4, and maybe depending on what we need at that time, like we've come off a big win, and that's a focus we need to have. Shawnee Harley with Winning Matters talks about culture breakers and planning to fail. Like, what are we going to do when this happens? So how does communication break down within a team? Like, that's a great question. But we talk about the ways that our culture's not going to go right. I've always been wondering, besides me just starting out or having that, what's a way to incorporate those type of questions throughout a year? Coach, PG, coming to faith.
There we go. Yeah, we the guy who did it, we would just touch base probably 3 days before. We were good. We did it on Wednesdays, which is why we called them personal growth meetings instead of Mondays. But he would just touch base Sunday and say, "Hey, what's going on with the team? What can we emphasize, or what do we need to stress?" And then he would put together again, and it could literally be a clip of and then just sharing kind of what that means for this week. And so very beneficial to us. Yeah.
You've been able to talk with a lot of great coaches, be around some as a player and also as an assistant coach. What are 3 characteristics, could be more, that you see in great coaches?
The first one that comes to mind is relational. I think just anybody who's in the coaching world, you at least you get in it. Maybe that's not why you stay in it, or maybe it changes over time, but you get in it because you had a great coach, someone who, who changed your life as an athlete, or, you want to change the lives of people, or maybe you didn't have a great coach and you go, well, I don't want a kid to have that experience. I want to get into coaching to give, so I thought about saying personable instead of relational, but the more I thought about it, I think you can be a great coach and not necessarily be personable, but you can be relational. At the end of the day, does a kid know that you have their back and you have their best interest in mind, or that you love them, that you support them? And not everyone is extremely personable who is a great coach, but they are relational and they are able to communicate that. It's like, this was not my experience growing up, but someone who has a dad maybe who never said that they loved them, but you always felt that. You always knew that. Like, he never said it, but I knew because he did this. And so there are some coaches who maybe don't ever say it, but their guys know, this guy's there for me. So someone who's relational, players drive programs. And so if that's not most important, I has to be at the top of the list. I feel like, and I think we do a good job of that here. One thing for me, and this probably doesn't apply to everyone, but is flexible. No, not that long ago, my way or the highway with everything was effective and it worked. And maybe just it worked because of the rules at the time at the college level, right? My way or the highway for most things is not going to be effective. And so you have to have some flexibility. What are the things that are really important? And, as Christian, okay, and I know we haven't talked a lot about this, but, over my faith journey, what I've learned is there's some things that are really important and I need to hold fast to those things.
Yeah.
And there are some things that aren't quite as important and people can have different opinions on me about that. And we're still on the same team and so the same with coaching, right? There's some things that are really important and you cannot lower those standards. You can't, but you have to figure out what those things are. We had a rebounding philosophy at the beginning of the year, and midway through the year, we were going, why are we doing this? We have two guys who are averaging less than an offensive rebound per 40 minutes, and we're sending them to the glass. That makes no sense. So
That's a good point.
instead of our transition defense being bad, let's just send those two guys back every time they're, so being flexible on the floor and off the floor. I try to, again, off the floor, I want the players to feel like they have a voice, but they can't have a voice for everything either, right? And so understanding off the floor, is this a time to ask the team or ask a couple of guys, what do you think about this? And having some flexibility in that, or going, no, I need to make this decision, so flexibility, again, that may not be for everyone, but I think that's a big one for me. And then accountability.
Let me jump in before accountability, because you mentioned two great words. I don't want to go through all three and then forget some of but relational. You mentioned like how a lot of coaches got into it because they had a great coach. And I never really thought about that. I'd love to know the connection between guys that got in that, like for me, Coach Thomas at the Colony is one of the most influential people in my life. So I think people when I was younger saw, like my senior year, Coach Drew and those guys called me Coach Saman. I don't know if it was condescending or what. No, but like I think people saw that maybe that was the route. And Coach Thomas would tell me, he told me in high school, don't do it because you won't make any money. But like I don't know if there's a lot of people, and maybe there are some, but I would say if it's a pie chart, the biggest chunk of people that are coaching is because they had somebody that did influence them like that. There is a possibility that, hey, that was a train wreck, not on my watch. Maybe that's out there, but that was a great connection there.
Yeah, my dad was my high school coach. I grew up in a coaching family, and I knew I wanted to coach. I sat on the bench from, a small school in East Texas is where I grew up. Probably can't tell from my accent that I grew up in Texas, but small school, East Texas, sat on the bench. I was, from kindergarten through 8th grade. But my dad had a huge effect on me wanting to get into coaching, but also at that same small school, right? You played other sports, and my football coach, my high school baseball coach just won his 500th game this past week. And again, small school. So he was the offensive coordinator for football and also the baseball coach. And
the janitor too. He did it all. Yeah.
When you're the baseball coach, there's a lot of maintenance that goes with that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But I sent him a text this week and said, he's someone who has, who deeply affected my life as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. And we don't talk, it's not like we talk all the time, but he knows what he means to me. And so it was cool to just celebrate him winning his 500th baseball game.
Cool.
But yeah, lots of, that's why most people get into it, is because they had a great coach and they go, I want to have that same effect on somebody.
I wonder why flexibility, I was thinking of why flexibility is so hard. I struggled with that. I probably ruined a lot of player relationships in my first 10 years, including my time here at Faith early on, because of a lack of flexibility. And I think it has to do with pride. The fact that somebody else at this school feels like what they're doing is as important as what we're doing.
Yeah.
The fact that dance needs the gym, dance? Like, are you serious? Well, no, to them, it's just as important.
Yeah.
Their district run, their state champion, all those things that we talk about, right, are maybe the outward goals or outside goal. But we got to give up our pride, and we've got to accept the fact that we're not that important. and what we're doing. While, yes, we're going to shoot for excellence in the grand scheme of things, we're just a small part of the school, of the athletic department. We are not the athletic department. But man, when that flexibility, when you feel that rigidness come up and unwilling to adapt, and I have to remind myself of this daily because I'm thinking of failures even in the last probably month or two, right? But I think that you have to check your pride in those moments.
For sure. And you have to be okay with just saying, we did it this way and it's not working. And as a head coach, that can be really hard to do that. And I would say that's not a one-time thing. If you're able to say, if the guys are hearing you say that, maybe not even necessarily basketball related, but like, hey, we tried this and this wasn't we tried the Lions games. We thought, I thought,
guys, that was a miss. That was
gonna be
that same and got it.
I thought it was going to be a great idea, and I was so fired up about it. And we won't do it again. But thanks for
Coach, I really hope you do it. I really hope. How cool would it be to see a college program do that, and to see maybe the little kid come out? And that's what I see. And I see the little kid come out again, and that's really fun. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, but just there are non-basketball opportunities for you to say those things for most coaches, and just not being afraid to just go, hey, I thought this would be a good idea and it wasn't, or we tried this and we're going to pivot. There were moments this year, especially as a first-year head coach,
yeah,
where I was messing. I messed up a lot this year, and just having the openness to go, hey, thanks for trying it this way. We learned how to not do it now, and we won't do it again. And so maybe when you're making a big philosophical change or something, as a high school coach, probably, you have to adapt to your personnel maybe more than at the college level where we're getting to recruit to a system. All of the best coaches in any sport at any level have made major changes the longer they're in the game. You used to play basketball 3 out, 2 in, and the ball was in the paint. And, as someone who coached for 40 years at a very high level, Mike Krzyzewski or whoever you want to say, you played one way, and then at some point you go, here's where the game's moving, and we're going to make this change. And so being flexible, being able to adapt, and the pride piece is a big point of just going, I messed up, I was wrong, whatever. I think that goes a long way with the players.
I apologize. This is my last point. We'll hit accountability. I've been the guy that every decision that's made around a school, everything that's done by parents, anything the players do, just pisses me off. Like I've had an opinion on everything, and I think there's probably a lot of other coaches on here like that. To your point about our faith, there are things with our faith, with society, and how those two things, maybe where there's friction, we need to have an opinion, and we need to be prepared to stand firm. No doubt. But there are so many things that happen throughout the day that we don't have control over, but that get us riled up, that we have an opinion on, that maybe this will help. It helps me give ourselves the ability to not have an opinion on something. I think Ryan Holiday talked about that a lot, and I don't know what Stoic said it, but it was, you have the ability to choose what you have an opinion on and what you don't. There might just be freedom in there, because if let's just say another coach from another program is saying or doing something, even within your own school, and man, it just ruffles your feathers, can you affect change with that? Like, is there anything you could do? If there's not, and there's anything you feel like you need to do, you need to go meet. But if there's not, it just bugs you, choose to not have an opinion, let it go, and maybe we can find just a little bit more peace, steadiness throughout the day.
Yeah, great advice. No, definitely.
Accountability.
I'll touch on that very briefly. I feel like just relational and flexible they were number 1 and 2 on my list for a reason. But with the flexibility is also having accountability, making sure, like, one of the things that I learned this year, again, lots of mess ups, lots of mistakes, was whatever you want your culture to be, you have to live that out every day, and you have to hold people to that standard every day. And that can be that can be exhausting at times, but it's also critical, because if you just let the big stuff go and you just let it go and let it go and let it go, you're going to look back 3, 6 months, a year from now and go, how did it get like this? Where did it happen? And it's because you weren't willing to have the hard conversation that was needed at that time. Having the wisdom, not everything calls for a big conversation or a big meeting or whatever, having the wisdom and discernment to know the difference, but also just going like, this is the standard. Here's how we do it. And you're going to meet the standard on the things that are really important. So if that's rebounding, making sure that if we send forward to the glass, that we're going to send forward to the glass every possession. If that's the shot quality that we're concerned about, then making sure that we're getting the shots we want at the time we want or whatever. Just the accountability piece on and off the floor. That was the third piece. I think that great coaches, that they do it for the things that are important to them. If you're doing that for everything, you're probably, you're going to lose a lot of guys, at our level, especially. They're going, this is not the place for me. But on the stuff that's really important, again, knowing what those things are, then making sure you're holding people accountable to that.
That question you brought up earlier in our talk about, does this lead to winning? I think that's where that comes into play. Does what shoe brand they wear matter? Does it lead to winning at all? If not, what do we care? Why do we care? Yeah. And if it, like, we used to do team shoes because I like the idea of, that's what we did in high school. That's what we did in college. I like the idea of us looking like one unit, like an army, even though we're not an army and we don't go to battle. We play games. But one of my best players years ago came up and said, "Coach, these shoes are killing me. Like I typically wear Nike. These are Under Armour." Yeah. I was like, "Hey, go get some Nikes right now." So figure out a way to allow choice, give them choice over the things that don't really matter to me. Maybe they're important to them. They don't really affect winning, but then also too, like, I can be on board with it. And so the compromise was any brand of shoe, it just has to be mainly white. If I watch film, I should be able to say they all wear white shoes. If you'd send me a picture like, is this white? It's not white. If you have to ask me, is it white? Then it's not. Like, you'll know. And then the secondary colors, they're just going to go in line with our school. So we're not going to go green. We're not going to go yellow. We're red, navy, like every other private school in America. We're red, navy, and white. And so, but Coach, I was so inflexible. Thanks. Inflexible.
I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm the wrong person to ask for sure.
Unflexible. So non-flexible for years on things like that. And then just had to figure out, like, what do I really want what lines do I really need to draw? And what lines am I just fighting just to be difficult? And then Paul Mills said at Wichita State, he said, if you're in coaching, you have to be willing to confront people. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to be willing to do that at the end of the day. If that is something that terrifies you, slippage will happen, in my opinion.
Well, it sounds like you've had our office bug, because we've had this shoe conversation, like our assistant coach, Bradley Spencer he does the gear stuff. And it's like, do we want to do a team shoe? Do we want to just let them get their own? Do we want to let them wear whatever? And I was like, man, I really do not care at all. And he was like, and because he runs it, that's his thing. He goes, I would love for it to be, a black or white shoe and not, green, purple, whatever. Yeah. And you're in charge of that, and that's great. And just communicate that, and we're good to go. So, the Nick Saban quote, if you want everyone to like you, sell ice cream. That's in my head constantly, because that is, that's a new thing for me this year, is I'm making decisions that, I know for a fact with most decisions I make, some people will like it and some people won't. And as a coach, right? Even playing time, I feel like, is the big elephant in the room when it comes to this. But there's 5 people on the floor, which means that there's X number of people who aren't getting to play. Or maybe you have 1 or 2 people on your team who are playing all the time and they're good, right? But then everyone else is like, I wish so if you want everyone to like you, sell ice cream. And then just, being honest and open and being able to have tough conversations and not running from those, not pushing those off, not going, we'll get to it, never really is what you're saying. But, just making sure that you're willing to hold people accountable for the things that need to be emphasized.
Yeah. And let's not intentionally or unintentionally steal their joy.
Yeah.
It's there needs to be some fun in here.
Mhm.
And I am all for standards and pillars. I like things to be sharp. I don't like wasting time. Part of that is just organization on our part, but part of it is how they approach things as well. But I think we're asking coaches like and myself just a great questions to ask yourself is, in what ways am I stealing joy? If it's intentional, like I know they really want to do this and I don't really care if they do or not, but I'm not going to let them. Why? Why do that? I think it's more unintentional. We don't realize the fun that we're taking that we could give them that doesn't really affect the approach, our culture, winning. I'm never talking about having a standardless society or team where there's no culture and you just let them do whatever. You just won't have a job for very long and you definitely won't win. But man, within the structure that we want to have, where can we stretch? Where can we bend? Where can we throw some lion games or an NBA skills competition in? And how can we be flexible with their shoes? I don't care what they travel in. I want them to travel in something. I don't care what they wear. So guys, here's your 5 options. Choose one.
Yep.
Why do I have to choose that? Choose one. I don't care. But so I think the art of it maybe is they get to choose what they want, but it's all what I want. Right? Like it's all within that.
Yeah, a great question that a head coaching friend of mine asks is, and most coaches played on some level, right? They played junior high school, college, professionally, whatever. Most basketball coaches played at some level or have been in a team environment, whether that was when they got to college, they were a student assistant or whatever. They've been around the game and they know what it should look like. And so the question that they ask is, would I want to play for me? And coach played at a very high level, but that doesn't mean we play Lions games all the time, or like, it doesn't mean we just goof around and have fun. But when you talk about stealing their joy, like what are the things as a player that got you excited? There are those drills that you hate, but you also love, right? Because they're as a competitor, you're like, this is And so, would I want to play for me? Are we making it to where we're getting better, but we're also not taking away their joy?
Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Scoreboard Media. Scoreboard Media works with high schools across the country to run professional sponsorship programs on their LED scoreboards. Whether you already have LED and you just want to supercharge the revenue, or you want to use sponsorship revenue to buy new LED video scoreboards, Scoreboard Media can help. They work with sponsors and advertisers locally, regionally, and nationally who want to connect with your school's community. Email info@scoreboardmedia.com to start the conversation and see what's possible.
And everything we're talking about here is culture. Culture is not just a slogan, something on a t-shirt, a hashtag. All those things are fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's the 1,000 little things that you do, little conversations, drills, sayings, all that stuff. So for you, how does culture drive performance in your program?
I mean, it affects everything, right? Shaka Smart, I saw this before the tournament, had a great definition for it, which is culture is how we act, how we interact, and how we respond. Those 3 things. And that stuck with me. Culture is how we act, interact, and respond. And so, I mean, if your program, like coaches, players, everyone, if that is all moving in sync, if we're acting, and that's not just basketball, right? Like that's for us. We got guys who live in dorms, apartments, right? I mean, we're trusting that. I mean, you're in the same position when guys go home too, right? We think we have way more control over their day than we actually do. But if we're acting, interacting, and responding appropriately, then things are moving the right direction. And so culture can be, it's a buzzword, but making sure that we're defining what culture is for us, and also making sure that our players know the standards. Man, it affects winning, I think, more than I know. I know that we say it, like, do we really believe it? When you think about how you spend your time as a basketball coach, right, and what we emphasize, how much time are you placing on building culture? Because it drives, it really does drive performance. And if we're not ever touching on it, if it's just in the first of the year meeting with our team, hey, here are the three things that are important or whatever, and then you're never referencing that or talking more about it, you have to do those things and emphasizing it daily.
Yeah. And your culture, your standards, your pillars, which I think so many times I've had some coaches almost separate the two. We have our standards and then we have our pillars or our culture almost. And so, but I think if you separate those, if they're all the same, I kind of view them mainly as the same things. I think easily say, how does standards drive performance? And I think we could arrive at the same answers that we're talking about. But I think it's good to look at them and make sure that they are not one way or the other completely relational based and don't cross over to training and floor and team timeouts, competitiveness, like everything we do on the floor. Make sure that it covers that arena, but then also it's not so far. So like I've had some cultures that, like, part of our culture is we play fast. I love that. Like that's great. That's a pillar of ours. Okay, how does play fast also translate to how we treat each other in the locker room? So like I think that's the beauty of being able to choose these standards and pillars is we want ideals that cover everything that we do, all of the how we act, interact, respond, no matter where we are. That's I thought.
If you're not careful with standards, pillars, all of that stuff, you can end up having 4 standards and 10 rules and 6 pillars. And you ask your guys like, hey, what are we, and they're like, we have 35 things like there's no way your guys know what's important to you when it's 35 different things. And so just really, like, again, if you can get the crossover that you're mentioning, then you just have 3 or 4 or 5 things that work for on the floor and off the floor. You don't have 30 things that the guys have to know. So again, just like everything, I've stolen this, but we say EDGE in our program, EDGE, and I love acronyms. So, it's going to have an acronym, but we break every huddle by saying EDGE. And so we want to play with an edge. I would like to think that I was a competitive player. I was a undersized, unathletic. I just had to, so I had to have an edge, a little bit. So we want to play with an edge, coach with an edge. Then at Harding, we have a great setup to where we have fantastic campus support, community support, and we want to use a home court edge, So those are the 3 things that we talk about. But we also, edge is energy, discipline, grit, and excellence. And so if you were to just ask anybody in our program, hey, what is y'all's thing? What is your standard? Then they would say edge, and then they would know what those 4 letters mean. Energy, okay, what type of energy are we talking about? I need to have high energy. Like I need to be a positive. When I come in the office, not that every day's a holiday or every day's the best day, but we want to be around positive, energetic people. We don't want to be the energy vampires or the Eeyores or whoever, but energy, discipline, grit, and we break all of those things down and what that looks like on the floor and off the floor. And then that's it, right? And we say edge, and then, but like, there should be, and hopefully no confusion over what are the 4 important things in our program and what that means, basketball and non-basketball.
Yeah. I mean, simple wins, right? Like clarity is really what allows players to own the style of play, the culture that they're in. Complicated systems are, I think, just the more room for slippage and for mistakes. And for people to maybe start to think, it's kind of like with shot selection. If I say only take good shots, well, 5 different people thinking good is different things. So we have to be on the same page. And the more clarity with our culture, the more chance, the higher chance of all of them being in line with it. I want you to check out, you probably already have, Make the Big Time Where You Are by Frosty. He has a whole chapter on the edge in getting athletes to the edge. And so one, because it's your acronym and you break, but it's also probably a great way to look at the edge. And he says it's a 3-sided coin. And I'm blanking on what the 2 sides are right now. But the third side is the edge. And how do you, as a player, how do you train at that edge? Because most players are on this side or that side, but we need to get them there. So great little, I wish I could describe it better, but a great chapter. Coach, before the speed round, where I get to know you even better, I'd love to know a little bit about how you and your program use social media to enhance it, to make your players feel special. How do you guys utilize it?
I'll start at the very beginning. So I grew up, maybe as social media was becoming, I'm young enough to know that like there are lots of coaches older than me who, are unfamiliar, don't know how to navigate, whatever. I see why it is what it is and why it's important. And so when I got into the college world, I was a women's basketball assistant in college for 8 years, okay, before this job. And so 5 of those were at Harding. I was at Arkansas State and Abilene Christian as well. And so I want to go back to Harding because this was when teams started using social media for promoting, for recruiting, for all of those things. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I needed to do it. And I knew that it was important. And so I had the best plan that I could come up with, and I worked on executing that plan. And I was like, what did I get myself into? This is not my world. And so I found a marketing PR person on campus, on Harding's campus, who was a student who was great at it. She was phenomenal. And so she said, hey, I want to help with women's basketball. This is what I'm good at, and this will be my career. Can I help? Yes, please. And so I handed her, here's my social media plan for the year. Here's what we've done. Here's what we're going to do. And she looked at it and ripped it up in front of me and was like, we are not doing any of that. And I was like, I've hired the right person. No, it was great because I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew to do it, And she taught me a lot, a college student who was just like, we need to do it. And something's better than nothing, but this is not much better than nothing either. So I'm going to improve it. And she did a phenomenal job. And she's fantastic in that career. And so I get to Arkansas State after Harding, and it's COVID, and colleges had all of these support staff positions that maybe handled, social media, all the, kind of just ops type things. Well, COVID cut a lot of those positions. So we had no one really running social media. And so my head coach there, I kept saying, when are we going to get a GA to do? And finally he just goes, he was tired of me bugging him, no doubt. He goes, hey, if you care about it so much, why don't you just do it? And this had been, we thought after COVID, it's like, when are we going to get these spots back? And the athletic department's, moving slowly or whatever. So that was the best advice he could have given me, which is, if you care about it so much, why don't you just do it? Because I knew it needed to be done, and I was just waiting for us to have the position to hire someone to do it. And so I did it. And again, it wasn't great, but I had learned from my Harding experience what not to do, and I didn't do that. And so then when I went to Abilene Christian, one of my biggest job responsibilities was like social media coordinator. I mean, I was an assistant coach, but I ran our social media. And
wow.
What's crazy to think about is, had I not had that conversation with the Harding student, several years prior of like, this is terrible and here's how you can do it better, I wouldn't have been ready for that position, 6-7 years down the road. And so at ACU, I ran social media. And again, it's not like I'm an expert on it by any means, but I have tried to educate myself on it. But I understand the value of it and why it's necessary and all that. So when I got hired at Harding, it was like, hey, if I'm thinking about a program in terms of like different boxes, and so you have your recruiting box and your academic box and your fundraising box and your alumni relations box, and then the basketball box is a pretty important box, and all, you got all these boxes, and we want to be the best in our league in all of these areas. Social media is one of those things where we need to be doing it at a very high level, because if you're not promoting your team and your players, you know what your players are going to do? They're going to go find someone else who will promote.
Because they're watching.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so that has been, we have a graduate assistant who actually came with me from Abilene Christian. Duncan Bacon is his name. And Duncan, again, he's 23 years old. He was a student manager for the ACU men's team. So I didn't work with him directly, but he, over COVID, like he had a lot of downtime. He's just a self-taught social media. He can do really anything we ask of him, but he just learned it was a skill where he just goes, I'm going to learn how to do this. And so going back to, if I could just give young coaches any piece of advice, have a skill that separates you from other people. And one of the big things that all college program needs, they need somebody who can make graphics, produce content. Everyone's looking for that. So if you can learn how to do that, man, that can just, on a resume, I mean, that can separate you. So I just, social media, how do we use it? I mean, it's necessary and you need to do it well. And so that's not a very specific answer, but it's something that every week we talk about what are we doing and how are we doing it and how can we do this better? And it's at the near the top of our list in terms of running a program.
Man, I think there's a lot of gold in what you said and great reminders for coaches to think about. I heard from a podcast, Hallie, this must have been, it wasn't even 2010 yet. Like it was before that, but I heard a podcast that said, if you're not actively using social media to promote your programs, then you're behind. And I remember thinking that was 2008 or 9. Like, I don't want to be behind.
Yeah.
Just because we don't like something, like there's a lot of about social media I don't like. I don't like how the fear of missing out, how that creates that in our kids or even myself. If I see our staff doing something like our athletic staff and I'm not in it, what the crap? Like, what does that mean? And I feel that, but and also like the way that it does promote comparing and how it can steal joy. And so there's so much, but also the way it helps players now with recruiting, it's the avenue. It's the avenue, and it's a lot of times the first point of contact for guys. The way that we can control the narrative a little bit of what people see, what show off our culture. It's more than just a score graphic from it. It's letting people inside. Like probably today, maybe tomorrow, the Lion Games highlight from this week is going to be out there. I'm going to spend the time to put that together. We asked that question: does this lead to winning? I don't know. I don't know if me putting this video, me doing these graphics leads to winning. I don't think it hurts. I think if culture is everything that you do, it's a part of that. And do we want our culture to be good? Do we want to be excellent? Or do we just want to say this is something we have to do? You mentioned a plan that person gave you and that you've had. Is that something that you have? Do you have something actually written out that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, so I just, and I didn't, again, I'm not tech savvy. I've learned, so I just have a Google sheet. And you know what I did? I put January 1 on there, and then I just went all the way through December 31st, because a lot of the things that we do are, a kid's birthday in our program, right?
Yeah.
That's not change every year. A holiday graphic, that's not going to change. There are certain things that each year I'm gonna have these things on the calendar, and then you just fill in from there. Like, all right, how many people are in your program? So,
overall.
Yeah, overall.
Yeah, 33.
So 33.
High school.
And so with 33, I can figure out how to stretch 33 people. My mind immediately goes to, if we do this for everyone, then all I need is 10 things, 10 recurring things. I wouldn't have this many things, but 10 recurring things where I highlight all 33 people throughout the year. A birthday is one of those 10 things. Get to know is one of those 10 things. There's different things that you can do to just say, and at ACU, we had a one-word graphic, a John Gordon one-word graphic. And so there were those things, right? I can make that stretch, but we're also putting out things and giving people an inside look at our players. So and it started with just learning what a Google Sheet was, because I didn't know. I was like, what is a Google Sheet? But then making that, for the whole year, getting that calendar, and then it's all digital. everyone can access that on our staff or whatever. And then we can just update stuff as we go, as people move on or graduate or, whatever. Yeah, I have that, and I'm definitely happy to share it too.
Awesome. And just to kind of piggyback off of that, every year when we have our coaches meeting here at Faith, one of our school's kind of social media person comes in and says, hey, send me stuff, anything that you make or whatnot. It's every year. She will comment like, I don't expect you to do as much as boys basketball, but send me things. I don't ever want other sports to feel bad, but it is a commitment that I've made, and at Faith, all my assistants are part-time. So they have other jobs in a real life. I'm the only one who sit here, but I also have, and this is to take some of the pressure off of coaches that do have what I would call real coaching jobs where they teach also. Like I've got off periods in study halls outside of a PE and basketball. So in season, and I don't know if this shocks people or not, but it's at least an hour a day working on graphics through Photoshop and then putting things out. I have a list and order that I do in season, but I don't, it's mainly we'll do JV scores and a graphic for them, but varsity gets the bulk of it. But you know what? Like, why not go do it year round? Let the parents see what we're doing, because if my son goes home and his mom will ask him every day and I'm standing right there, she'll say, hey, what'd you do in basketball today? Or how was it? It was good. Oh, she's like, what'd you do? I don't know. I'm like, landed. Like, I was right there, buddy. We did a ton of stuff. So like, if that's happening in my house, that's the message. But you have to be organized with it, because just like this, the podcast, if you're going to commit to doing it, then you've got to stay consistent. But I do think it's something that it matters.
Canva is really easy. That's what I learned how to use at Arkansas State, when my boss was like, if you care, then figure it out. And I was like, well, Canva's pretty simple. And then when I got to ACU, my boss was like, do you know how to use Photoshop? No, but I'm willing to learn. And so what I did was, with both programs, was 45 minutes a night. I just put a timer on my phone. I set my phone on the kitchen counter, and I was uninterrupted 45 minutes. I'm going to play around with Photoshop, and I'm going to learn how to do it. I'm going to play around with Canva. And that took maybe a month of 45 minutes every day. And then you get it down, at least on a basic level. And then it's way less time, but learning, but you still have to put the time into making graphics. And so as a Division I assistant, outside of basketball practice or games and recruiting, if you were going, hey, how did you spend your time as a social media coordinator? 80% of my time was thinking about social media, and so as a Division I assistant coach. And so there are people on staffs who, again, if you can just create gain that skill, then there's room for you somewhere.
Yeah, and just to kind of finish up this part of the talk, I think you're right on the money. Even at the high school level, I have felt like the next assistant that I'm able to go after and find, a big part of that job is going to be ability to use, promote, be creative with social media. Because here's what I can do. I do birthdays. I could do get-to-knows. I can do all these things, but I'm not fun and I'm not creative. Meaning like, and I don't know like what emojis and what's cool and this or that. And for any high school coaches that do want to know, like, to me, the gold standard of what a high school social media what it could look like, Midland Christian School, Trent Langford, there, the assistant for Chris Ryburn, the dude's on another level. Like, so there are programs out there doing it. I'm trying to do my very, very best. But if you are, like that guy said, if you're thinking it's not important or that's just not something you care about, you may be behind.
And if you're thinking about just an easy, small win to make your program better, if you're not doing social media at all or not doing it well, it does not take a whole lot to make pretty big gains in that area. That's an easy space to go, here's how our program's going to improve over the next 12 months. And I'm going to develop this skill or hire somebody who has the skill. And then our program's going to be in a better spot 12 months from now, and then continue to grow in other areas.
And I think don't be fooled for us not to think that other programs and other families don't also see what we're doing. I had one of our competing high schools years ago, a parent came up and just said, hey, I know we don't go here, I just love following your guys and stuff. Like, it does matter, and it is, at the end of the day, it's just it only costs our time.
Are you ready to level up your team's skill development? Well, Bology is here to support you in driving accountability and skill development. The Bology app is more than just tracking. It's a resource for enhancing skills, knowledge, and mindset across your program. Join coaches all across the country using Bology to simplify training and empower your athletes. Let's build consistency, accountability, and skill development together.
Hey, the speed round. These are going to be quick questions. First thing that pops out at you.
Okay.
Favorite ice cream flavor?
Cookies and cream, Oreo, anything related like that.
Good call. Good
That's
call.
fine.
Greatest shooter of all time?
Steph.
Yeah. Just makes sense. If you're at a dinner party and you could choose 3 people from any time period, who do you want to eat with?
Man, probably I would go Jesus would definitely be one of those people.
Paul. And I almost feel like, though, like, like,
Can't pick him. That's
yeah.
that's not fair.
It's like, I'm going to ask you a little bit your favorite book, or book.
Yeah.
What book would you give somebody other than the Bible, other than Jesus? Who are the 3 people?
I think I was a history major. I would love for Abraham Lincoln to be there.
Yeah.
And then I would probably go coaches. So I would probably say like Saban and Coach K. Probably that would be my group.
That's a good one.
Coach with a little history, yeah.
Yeah. Best basketball movie of all time?
Oh, man. Hoosiers. That's what I'll go with.
Nice. Texting or talking?
Talking.
For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
Definitely shot clock. Arkansas just added one. Texas.
Hey, come on.
Changes the game. Going recruiting, too. I know coaches love it, but going recruiting, it makes the game way more entertaining. Texas, that is make it happen.
You're saying that a coach doesn't want to come watch 45 seconds of ball reversals?
That makes it very boring for a college coach to drive 3 hours to watch one team.
Did you hear that? UIL, TAPS, come on. See, SBC has done it in Texas. One of our 3 major classifications or organizations, they've put it in. And you know what? The schools are still running. The teams are still playing. They figured out a way. I actually had one coach say that they've seen them where the same person running the clock, it's on that. So clock, it's right there. And the same person does it.
Arkansas has a 35-second, and on a miss, I think it still resets to 35 seconds. So the school that is worried about, like the, I don't know, competitive advantage or disadvantage, like, okay, you can still run 30 seconds of offense too if needed. Nobody does that, but
yeah.
It's still a possibility.
Favorite holiday?
Christmas.
You're up 3 on defense. There's 5 seconds left. Do you foul or no foul?
Man, this is not a quick answer. We were the worst defensive free throw rebounding team in the country this year. Everyone got the rebounds against us. So that second free throw, always, I was just praying they would make it. We would we don't even want to risk having to for them to get, so
play good D, tip our hat. If they make it, we'll win in overtime.
Yes. Yeah. So that was for that team. That may evolve depending on the team.
What book would you give someone?
Crazy Love. It's an older book by Francis Chan, a book that as a 19-year-old college kid going to Harding, I read, and it changed my life.
Wow.
So now it's 15 years old, but
yeah,
fantastic book.
That's cool. Favorite place to travel?
Oh, man, Hawaii. Harding would, as a player, we would make that trip every 4 years. And so I made it as a player, and then I also got to make it as a coach, too. So
Are you going to go every year, though, as a coach? Because we'd see right through that.
You have some donors I can talk to after this Zoom to make that happen. But I've been twice. The second time, my wife found out that she was pregnant with one of our 3 kids, like a few months prior to the trip. And she was so sad that she did not get to go to Hawaii.
But you still went.
I did still go. I had some games to coach. I was very sad.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry I have to go. I would
have to go. Yeah, exactly.
All right, last one. In basketball, as a player, who's the GOAT?
I'll say MJ, but it's really close. I could see the argument both ways. Our guys talk about this all the time, and it's probably 50-50. Instead of me going, this is the GOAT, just appreciating greatness for both of them, is probably where I would lean.
stand for something, Coach. Like,
No.
choose a side.
MJ, gun to my head,
No.
but LeBron, what he's done,
Yeah.
I mean, is really incredible for the durability and the level. I mean, I think 20 years of All NBA, is what he's going to get to.
Maybe greatest career of all time. I think there's actually like 3 different questions. 4. Okay, here's the 4 questions.
Okay.
Greatest of all time.
Okay.
Greatest winner of all time. Because you could say Bill Russell might be the greatest winner of all time.
Yeah.
And other guy, but favorite player of all time. Because that might not be the GOAT. Like Curry's probably one of my favorite players. Pistol Pete was one of my favorite players. And then greatest career of all time.
Yeah.
Because I think LeBron's in that. Like
the longevity,
Yeah.
Best ability, durability. Like, I mean, he's done it for, no one. It's Tom Brady, right, in football. Although Tom Brady's probably the best and greatest career there, but like no one did it for as long as he did at the level he did.
Yeah. But the question's flawed, though. The question of who's the GOAT is flawed. Hey, Coach, this was so much fun. You and I haven't had much interaction, but to get to talk hoops with you, learn more about your program, just thank you for being so open and honest. And it was an honor for me.
Thank you for having me on. My email, wjameson@harding.edu. If anybody, wants to reach out, has any questions, I'm always happy to help. And so thanks again for the conversation.
And let's do this. I will send you the Lion games. You send me the social media plan. Deal?
All right. We can do that. Deal. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.